Hi everyone, I'm Matthias from Interactive Asia and the Ventuz Academy. In this quick Blitz tutorial, I want to show you how to get started with Ventuz 8 in just a few minutes. So let's jump right in and see what Ventuz can do. Ventuz comes with a couple of tools: the Ventuz Launcher, the Ventuz License Manager, the Ventuz Designer, the Ventuz Director, and of course also the Ventuz Runtime. Let's open up the Ventuz Launcher because from there we have access to all the tools in Ventuz. We have our Project Browser tab, then we also have access to our Configuration tab, to our Live tab and to our Learning tab. And on that right button we can see all the machines that are running Ventuz in our network. Back in our Project Browser we have that yellow button where we can create a new project. With that Create New Project assistant we basically can set up a project name, we can define the project folder and many other things. Here on the bottom left corner we can see the actual running Ventuz version, and if we press that little exclamation mark we have access to our release notes, and with that other update button we also can basically see if we have the latest Ventuz version installed. So our system is up to date. Let's check also now our message window where we also get messages, global messages of errors, of infos. With the license button we have access to our license manager where we will see the details of our license. Now we click our configuration tab, and here we can see in the left side we have our status and many more submenus which we will discuss right now. So here in the status we basically can see the Ventuz version, the group ID, the machine ID, the IP addresses which are available, all the running Ventuz services and the active configuration files. On the bottom here you have also access to all the log files. Now let's go to our general configuration where we can change our machine name, our group ID, our machine ID, and we also can give every machine a tag. So this is important for cluster setup, for example. In the next step, we will check our machine configuration where we can create new configurations for each setup. Basically, if we simply press that new button, then we type in our new name for the configuration and press create. And now we are in our machine configuration editor where we have access to remoting settings, DMX settings and extended settings. So let's say if you want to use some DMX, if you want to control DMX, then you simply go to this configuration tab and you open the ArtNet and you enable the ArtNet, and of course then you have all that settings what you need to set up based on your DMX configuration. Once you're happy, you save it, you close it, and then Ventuz will ask you if you want to activate this new configuration. So every not activated configuration you also can delete with that little trash icon. Under the device configuration we also can do the same. We press that new button and type in a new name for our device configuration. Press the create button. In our device configuration editor we have now access to all our video settings, to our touch settings, to tracking settings if you want to use some camera tracking system like TrackMan, Stipe, NCam or 3D for example. You also have access to all your audio settings where you can make pipe mappings as well, and you can access preview window settings. So let's say in our video setup I want to use now a camera as a video input. So all available devices you will see here, then I simply drag and drop that to my video inputs. And I also want to use, for example, a device as output. Yeah, so for sure we want to show something. So I have connected 3 screens to my machine. So I can choose one and simply select it and add it. And just for example, I will add a second display because I have 3 here, and add that as well. So once I'm happy, I would then press save, right? But of course, I just want to use one display now, so I simply delete one of these 2 displays with that little trash button, press yes. I have to press yes here, and then I save it, and again I can close it then, and Ventuz will ask me if I want to activate this newly created device configuration. Now let's select our render setup. In Ventuz, every render setup is assigned to one project. So that means each project can have a couple of render setups. As you can see here, our default scene has no render setup. If I press or select my Ventuz 8 Blitz tutorial, then you can see I created already a render setup, which is called Full HD one screen. And with that new button, I simply create a new render setup, which I will call now, for example, one screen full HD. Then I press create, and now we are in our render setup editor. Here in this editor, we have a composition and we have the screens. Yeah. So for example, if I want to add one more screen, then you can see I simply press this button. I can set up the resolution now, 2 screens lying above each other. And now I simply can arrange that screens in my render setup based on the real life setup, right? So, and then once I'm happy, because I deleted now, once I'm happy, I simply press save and close this. And then also here on the right side, you see now we have 2 render setups, and you simply select the one and press the activate button, which one you want to use for your project. Now we click our live tab. In our live tab, we can again see all the status, and all that left side grayed out stuff will be activated once a runtime is running. That could be a Ventuz runtime or simply your Ventuz designer. And then you have access to many, many more real-time properties of this running project. And under the Learning tab, Ventuz did a very great job where they really put together a lot of tutorials, how-tos, YouTube tutorials, where you really should start to get deeper if you like Ventuz. Now let's jump into our Ventuz designer, because that's the core for Ventuz development. So simply select your project or create a new one. That's totally up to you. Once you click that button, then the Ventuz designer will start. The Ventuz designer user interface by default will have your layer editor, your hierarchy editor, your content editor, the properties editor, and your live render window, where you can see immediately what you are developing. Here on top, you also have access to the main menu, where you can create new scenes, where you can save scenes or export scenes into Ventuz presentations or Ventuz scene archives. On the right top side, you can change between design layouts, logic layout, animation layout, or data layout, depending on what you are focused now on that development in Ventuz. We will mostly work in the logic layout. Now, under the view, we have also access to all available windows in Ventuz. For now, I want to turn on the toolbox, because in the toolbox, we can find all the important nodes that are available for our Ventuz development. And as you can see, the nodes here in Ventuz are categorized by tabs as well, right? So here we have access, for example, to textures, color materials, sound, logic, text, input, outputs, animations, geometries, right, where you can find cubes, rectangles for development, also interaction nodes, virtual and augmented reality, light sources, and some other stuff that are very important and cool to create super nice interactive scenes in Ventuz. You also can stack windows in your designer wherever you want. For example, if you want to have it on the left side beside your render window, simply stack it there, or if you want to have it on the right side, simply stack it there, and you can do that with all of that windows, right? And let's say you are running into some trouble and everything is messed up, then you simply can go to the view, and here under the workspace, simply press reset to default layout, and everything is back to normal. Now let's start to develop some simple scene in Ventuz, right? To do that, I will start here in the layer window, in the layer editor. As you can see, we have always by default a 3D layer. And if you press that little plus button, then we can add more layers. For now, I just want to add a gradient 2D layer, right? So I press that plus button, 2D layer, and select the gradient. And then you can see now we have already a background like black and white. If we press that little arrow left side of our layer, then we also have access to the layer properties, where we then also can change our gradient, can create our own customized layer. So for now, I will delete that layer because I want to work in our 3D layer first. So to get into layers, you have to press that little pen on that layer. And now we are basically inside of our layer, correct? So as you can see, we have now our hierarchy editor. And let's also open up our toolbox, because we need to use our nodes. So for now, I will go to our geometry tab over here, and I drag and drop in a rectangle. And as soon as I have that rectangle in our hierarchy editor, you can see it in our render window. And you also can see on the right side in our properties that we have access to all the properties of that selected node. In that case, our rectangle, where I can change the size in X and the size in Y. So now let me add one more node from the world category, and that's the axis, because with that axis we basically can move, rotate and scale our geometry. As you also can see, depending on what node I've selected, I have access in the property editor to that selected node. So now our axis node gives us the position X, Y, Z, the rotation X, Y, Z, and the scaling as well. And then if you want to bring it back to the default value, simply press that little white circle beside the value. If you want to delete some node, you simply select it and you press delete on your keyboard. So now let's change that rectangle to a cube. So let me drag and drop in a cube. And if I select the cube, you can see we also have now access to our X, Y, and Z values, right? Let's also rotate it a little bit so that we can really see more of that perspective of that 3D cube. Let's change back to our properties, and then you also can see you have a lot of properties like the bevel radius and things like that. Let's also add a color now. So you simply drag and drop a color in front of your geometry, in that case a cube. So you have to put it in front like this, and then you select the color node, and then you can see you also have access to, let's do that again, and then you can see you also have access to all your colors. Let's change that maybe now to orange. You also have access to all your nodes if you selected one of the hierarchy or content editors, and you simply press the spacebar, and then you can type in whatever node name you want to add. For now, I want to add a mover, right? And as you can see, that mover I cannot put into the hierarchy, but I can put it in the content editor. So we have basically hierarchy nodes and content nodes. So let me add that mover inside here. You also can see the difference of the hierarchy and content nodes based on that brackets, right? So all the nodes with the left and right brackets only fit to the hierarchy node, as you can see here. And in the logic nodes, for example, the nodes with the brackets top, bottom only fit into the content node, but never into the hierarchy node. So now we have our mover node. If I select it, we have access to all the properties, right? For now, we have access to the input properties, and we also can see the output properties of our mover node. So if I select the outputs, then you can see the outputs are running from -1 to 1, right? If I want to see inputs and outputs, I simply press this little button over there. And now on top, we have the input properties and the output properties down here. So the input properties are always used for setting up something, and the output is then the result, right? In that case, that value which is running from -1 to 1. So now let's bind this mover to the axis of our cube. If I want to bring some node into the content editor, I simply select it. If I want to bring multiple, I have to press and hold Shift, and then I can bring in multiple nodes from the hierarchy into the content editor. For now, I only want to use the axis node because I want to bind the Y rotation of our axis to that output of our mover. So I select the axis and I simply drag and drop basically that Y value with the left mouse button over our mover. So let's do that. Let's press and hold left mouse button and drag and drop it over our mover. And as you can see already a little bit, the cube is shaking very slowly because he is running from -1 to 1 now. So let's also change these properties now. So our minimum input may be -90 and +90, and now you can see it already. I think I can also change my duration over here. So this minus value to maximum value should run maybe in 10 seconds now. And I can set up here whatever I want. For example, if I want to have it run in 360, I simply set up 0 minimum and 360, and I turn off the swing. And now our cube will run infinitely in a 360 loop. So now we are in a new empty scene, and I want to show you how to create some text in Ventuz. So you simply go to Toolbox Text and bring in some text 3D. Then you can choose between block text, enrich block text, or scroll text. And once you are there, also bring an axis in front so that we are able to make it a bit larger, scale it up. And we also can rotate it here, as you can see. So let's select the text node, and then in our text node we have access also to all the properties where we can change the alignment. For example, I want to bring it in the vertical and horizontal to the center, like we have for now, as you can see here, right? And of course we can make it larger and also rotate it, scale it. And let's also bring maybe a color, or let's make it a different color. So let's bring also a color node in front of this text. And let's change it maybe to something orange again, or golden or silver, whatever color you like. So now I want to show you how to create a very simple interactive scene. So I bring in a cube, and I also put an axis in front of that cube. And let's make it a little bit larger. I also can add some rotation. I will show you very soon why. And maybe we give it also a little bevel. And now we will go to our interaction category in our toolbox. And we will choose here our touch orbit. And let's bring it here in front. And now you can see we can interact already with our cube. So what you can see here now, because I bring it in front on the very root of my scene, because else we added already that rotation values of our axis to our interaction node, and that's sometimes not very clean. So let's bring in a new node on the very root of our scene, and now you can see it. We clearly and cleanly can interact with our cube here. So now let's delete this scene or this nodes, and I want to show you also another interactive node. That's the touch paint basically, and as you can see, very, very simple. You simply bring it in and you are already able to interact, to paint something. This is actually also working very nice with Optituyo, with our touch sensor, where you can also find the link in the description. And of course here in the touch paint nodes, like in all the other nodes, you have a lot of settings, like here the size, the color, and things like that. You can use it as an eraser, so you can very, very easy build some super cool, nice interactive touch applications with Ventuz. So now I want to show you how you can create keyframe animations. So I bring in a cube and the axis just to resize that cube a bit. And then we have to go into our animation, and I bring in a keyframe animation node into our content editor. So next thing what we have to do, we have to bind all the values we want to animate with our keyframe animations into our keyframe animation. To do that, we simply select the axis, and here I drag and drop my position X, my position Y. Simply drag and drop that over your keyframe, and I also want to use or animate the X and Y rotation of our cube. So now I select my keyframe animation, but now we have to get access to our animation editor. To do that, I have to change the layout to animate. And now down here you can see we have now access to our keyframe animation, right? So if I put two keyframe animations inside, depending on which one is selected, you will have access to that one in your animation editor here on the bottom. Okay, so now you can see in our keyframe animation we have now our bindings, the position X and Y, and the rotation X and Y. So if I want to animate them, if I want to create keyframes, I have to make sure they are selected, and with that orange button I can create keyframes basically. Okay, so now I have my start keyframes, right? So that's 0, 0, 0. And now I simply can also change here the timeline view from absolute to seconds. So let me change that to seconds, because that's a bit more easy for us to understand. And now I say, okay, after, let's say, 1 second, I want to create another one. So I simply move that red line where I want to have it. And then I also adjust my values here, the rotation X, Y, right? and then I simply press that orange keyframe button again, and now all that in between keyframes Ventuz will handle for you, as you can see already. Now let's create one more keyframe after another second, and let's also rotate it somewhere wherever you want. And then we also create another keyframe with that orange button, and now you can see we already have a nice, messy, very simple animation, right? And maybe we create a last one where we bring back everything to 0, and let's run that now. If you press space, then you can run that keyframe animation. So in this very final part, I want to show you how you can publish or export your scene to your customer. You simply go to the main menu, to File, and then to Export. And here you can see you can export it as a Ventuz presentation, which will simply run with the runtime with a double click. You also can export it as a Ventuz scene archive, which will simply export that scene, and then another Ventuz developer can open this archive or this scene on another computer. You also can export it as a Ventuz project archive, which will basically include everything from this project, all the scenes you created within this project. And then you simply select whatever option you want and you save it on your computer wherever you want. So with this, you should have now all the foundation to start your journey with Ventuz. Please also like and subscribe, and hit also the bell to get noticed whenever we do a new tutorial. Please also check out our other tutorials here on this channel, and let us know in the comments if you have specific requests for upcoming tutorials. Until then, enjoy your time with Ventuz. Have fun. Bye bye.